And we are live.
Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings, or should I say, orale. Currently in some bohemian outskirt hippie town off of Puerto Vallarta. And of course, I am joined also by Jason Bermas. WeAreChange, obviously, for our weekly WeAreChange news show where we go over all the important news that happened this week. So we're going to be live for 1 hour. We're going to be taking your questions specifically on YouTube. And of course, Super Chats go first since they help us run independently. Here in Mexico, maybe I'll get into reasons why later on in this broadcast. But Jason, man, how are you? It's been a crazy bipolar kind of news week, almost like every news week. But this week specifically has been kind of crazy.
It has been, Luke. I am well. You know, it is Memorial Day weekend, so it's been a long weekend for me. Kids didn't have school Friday. They don't have it tomorrow. It's been raining all weekend, but my spirits are up. And I know we don't often talk about military service, but I would like to say that for those that have served and served justly, I do appreciate it. That does not mean you get a carte blanche holiday for just serving in the military, in my opinion. But for those that abide by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, good for you. It's your weekend.
Yeah, surprisingly, there's a lot of followers from like the military and especially the police that actually get into a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, the deeper stuff beyond all the fake news and all the propaganda and click tits that are usually out there. But that's why in this broadcast we're going to be talking about Elon Musk, of course, the crazy story that happened with Tommy Robinson. We also have some positive news at the end of this broadcast. But I think the main story that everyone was talking about this week, Jason, was definitely North Korea with the bipolar flip-flopping that we have been seeing going on. And now we're getting more news that's just in, that Trump just tweeted that North Korea has, quote, brilliant potential and will be a great economic and financial nation. And this is, of course, as the United States negotiator just crossed the DMZ line to meet with the same diplomat who called Mike Pence, the U.S. vice president, a political dummy. And again, so supposedly the summit is on. As of now, it was off. There was a big statement by Donald Trump. I'm still sticking with my original analysis that this meeting will happen, but it will be symbolic and nothing else. So it's also very important to note that the United States also threatened to nuke North Korea this week as well. So we're seeing a whole bunch of different up and down statements from Donald Trump going from we're going to nuke you to, oh yeah, you guys have brilliant potential. So it's going to be fascinating regardless because there's so much back and forth here that absolutely makes no sense at all, Jason.
Absolutely, Luke. And, you know, me and you have gone back and forth on this subject probably more than any other subject out there in the last couple of months. And I remember earlier in the week, in fact, last broadcast, you were like, this is the segment I like to tell Jason he's wrong. And that was when it was first falling apart, right? We first had that big fall apart moment. And I was like, well, you know, I'm holding out hope. And then a day later, maybe it's on. A day later, maybe it's off. And actually, I think by Wednesday, out on the Facebook page where we're covering this constantly, on again, off again, I noted that this was like a bad high school relationship where the breakup happens and then like 10 minutes later, it's on again, off again. And funny enough, Luke, you posted something where they parodied this in a text message conversation, and it was heavy on quotes from The Notebook. Never seen the movie, but I get the reference.
I've seen the movie. It actually surprised me. I actually thought it was an okay movie. I liked it. Yeah. Okay, we're going off topic here.
But my point is that there's so much. I mean, we have an administration that takes Twitter to the next level, takes social media to the next level, not afraid to insult a dignitary. Now, when Pence goes out and says, hey, Libya models are coming, and somebody comes back from the North Korean side and says, whoa, wait a minute, Pence, you're a political dummy. Oh, that's the firestorm. And now it was back and forth, but it looks like, I think June 12th, not only are we going to get a summit, but we're going to get a promise, at least, of some kind of a treaty or paperwork. Whether that goes through, Luke, I don't know. But remember, the guy blew up his nuclear facilities. Then we were going to nuke him. Then he puts a video of the close-up blowing up. Then we'll think about it. You know, it's back and forth. I think the summit happens. Where it goes from there, I can't tell you.
Well, I think it's going to be symbolic, but not much is going to happen. I did tell you that the neocons are going to come out of Donald Trump's administration and screw this up, and they did screw it up temporarily, but now it looks like it's still back on somehow again. So, I do think the meeting will happen. I do think it will be very symbolic, but nothing else other than that. North Korea also released political prisoners, American citizens, to the United States, which was a very big gesture and a very good move, and I think good news all around for everybody, which I think is great. And you do have to cover this very skeptically, but also you have to appreciate the good things that happen, and having 3 people not in North Korean gulag, I think, is excellent news and a step forward, definitely in the right direction. So again, skeptical, we'll see what happens. And moving on to the next story that everyone's talking about on the internet, not much on the mainstream media. Also in regards to political prisoners, of course, I want to talk about the latest situation with Tommy Robinson, who's a right-wing activist who is out there live streaming a court proceeding that a judge ruled that there can't be any reporting of. He was promptly arrested. This was his second contempt of court charge from what I believe, from what I've been reading online. And he's been automatically jailed for, 13 months. And in the order, in the court proceedings, what was really terrifying was that this judge ruled that this court proceeding couldn't even be reported on. And we saw information redacted in real time. And of course, there was a similar order put on the case where 29 accused people faced 170 charges with girls that they were bringing into sex slavery, 18-year-old girls. There was even one that was 11 years old. Of course, Tommy Robinson was covering that case, which also had a gag order, which he decided to film and still report on. And because of this news, obviously hundreds of people have been demonstrating near Downing Street in London. There's been over 250,000 signatures right now calling for Tommy Robinson's release. And there's been a lot of rumors and speculation that Tommy Robinson was beat up when he was in jail. We're getting confirmation now that did not happen, and you actually could see on his own personal Facebook page that his family and friends have access to, that they reported that Tommy is safe, and reports of him being attacked are untrue. I saw a lot of breaking news, Tommy Robinson attacked, with more click-tit fake news, wannabe alternative media organizations pushing that just for clicks, which is just horrendous to do. The implications of just these people who try to get clicks are just disgusting, to say the least. They're also saying Tommy does not have access to social media, and so his Facebook page will continue to be updated by his team. There are a lot of misinformation going around, and we will ask that until any such reports are verified by this page to regard them as untrue. They're also calling for support of Tommy Robinson, and obviously a lot of people have come out to support, mainly because of the court's effort to censor this story. Breitbart put up an article. They were first to take it down. They released another article where they just wrote redacted instead of Tommy Robinson's name. And it was absolutely terrifying, Jason, seeing news articles about this just being completely taken down in real time as the story was breaking. There's also a friend of mine who's a lawyer in Washington, D.C., Will Chamberlain, who's tweeting that this gag order of Tommy's case could actually be appealed, and they have some time to appeal it and contest it, which it looks like they will be doing through the court proceedings officially. But just absolutely terrifying to see such control. And it's also nonsensical, since the court proceeding happened. He was given 13 months in jail, and this reason to so-called have this reporting ban was to not have any prejudice during the court proceedings. Well, the court proceedings are over. He's in jail. I don't understand this whole gag order that went out there. And of course, it absolutely defies any laws of logic, and is bringing a lot more needed attention to this big specific case that's happening here in London, which is a true test of political freedom that you have in the United Kingdom.
Absolutely, and it's a failed test, Luke. Obviously, it's a failed test. Now, just to start, they banned people from reporting on a multiple rape and grooming case. Now, in stark contrast to that, the media was encouraged to cover the Count Dankula hate speech case, where again, this young man put out a YouTube video and was sentenced to prison time. Plenty of coverage for that. That's egregious. Now you have somebody who is actually reporting on this, Luke. He's just reporting because there's nobody else there. They've made reporting illegal. Then talk about his speedy trial. Well, not much of a trial at all. Basically, almost like a military tribunal sentencing. In the same day, this man, whom I don't always agree with, and by the way, I understand maybe why some people are a little offended by his tactics, if you will, Luke. You know what I'm saying? He's certainly, I'm for free speech, and I would never want his speech to be thwarted, and even more egregious speech. I don't even think that his speech is egregious, by the way, but I understand where some people could interpret it as racial hatred, right? Interpretation, I'm not saying that's what it is. That should never be banned. Free speech, no matter how abhorrent, Luke, should never be banned. We have to win in the court of opinion, the court of ideas. And if having an idea gets you over a year in prison, where there's talk of this man being beaten up and murdered. We know that he hasn't been beaten up in prison, but there's people that say, hey, he's not going to last 13 months in this prison. It's over for him. It's crazy. And it's only going to get worse and worse. And we're going to get into that moving on to some other articles. But this is just, we failed the test. The UK has now failed the test. They've jumped the shark. Free speech is no longer relevant there.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what actually happens with all the appeals that are happening with the legal court proceedings. It didn't seem like there was even a jury that helped deliberate this sentence, and obviously this is his second contempt of court. Obviously, this isn't a right-wing issue. This isn't about Islam. This is about free speech. It's also very interesting to see a lot of left-leaning websites not really cover this issue, but for the principles that it stands for. This is a very important case and sets a very dangerous precedent for the future of freedom and what governments could get away with. And I know a lot of people, again, I don't totally agree with Tommy Robinson on a lot of issues. We have a lot of different political differences, but I actually met the man. I hung out with the man. A lot of people accuse him of being racist. He hasn't shown me from the times we hung out that he's racist at all. We got drunk a couple times too, had a number of conversations about a number of issues. Definitely don't agree with him on a lot of his political ideas, but at the same time, it shouldn't be about his ideas. It should be about the basic principles of a man live streaming being ultimately sentenced to 13 months in jail, which is just egregious and crazy. And the United Kingdom doesn't shy away from their kind of Orwellian Big Brother police state. I mean, there's more surveillance cameras there than almost anywhere in the entire world. And they're definitely draconian when it comes to squashing down political dissent, which leads us perfectly into the next story with the next political prisoner that is also in the United Kingdom. And that, of course, is Julian Assange. And this week, we also saw WikiLeaks release infrared red footage of covert, quote, grab teams that are out there outside of the Ecuadorian embassy where Julian Assange of WikiLeaks is held up, with them getting ready to arrest him, most likely for secret indictments by the United States, who wants to extradite him here to the United States and prosecute him for releasing military and government documents that showed the world what the U.S. military and what the U.S. government and what Hillary Clinton was really up to. So it's interesting to see, Donald Trump, who previously said he loves WikiLeaks, but also surround himself and put in people around his administration that ultimately want to prosecute Julian Assange and throw him in jail. We also got word from an Ecuadorian minister saying that the treatment of Assange is unjust, and that's just putting it lightly. About 60 days ago, they cut him off entirely from the entire world, making sure that he can't have internet access and making sure that he can't get guests. He could see his lawyers, but that is it. Now imagine being stuck in one room for a number of years and now totally having your internet cut off and not being able to see anyone. So solitary confinement conditions, to say it lightly, and it's something that also needs to be addressed. Also is a major issue that people should care about and should be considerate, because if people like Tommy Robinson, people like Julian Assange go down, the state wins, and it sets a very dangerous precedent that will, of course, silence a lot of future people from speaking out and expressing themselves freely, which is the cornerstone of any civilized society, which slowly is being taken away from us, Jason.
I wouldn't say it's that slow anymore. And let's not forget that although the United States wants to prosecute Assange, it has nothing to do with the documents that he's released, supposedly. Of course, it has everything to do with those documents, Luke. But What are they charging him with? Well, he had sex with a woman who wanted to have sex with him. She spent the night, and then she alleged while they were sleeping in the same bed together, after having sexual relations with one another, he tried to slip one past the goalie. This was attempted rape. We need to get this man immediately. I mean, can you imagine that? I remember.
Those charges. A lot of those charges have been cleared about just the insanity with the laws that they had in that country where he was persecuted for. And I think even the victims came out and spoke and dropped some of the charges against him. The main charges, though, not many people know about, are the secret grand jury indictments on Julian Assange that people, of course, can't also talk about or report on, and of course, they're also top secret. And many people believe that as soon as Julian Assange gets kicked out of the Ecuadorian embassy, either by the Ecuadorian government, either by the UK government, that automatically he'll be arrested and extradited to the United States because of these secret grand jury indictments going after him releasing a lot of government documents. I think they're going to try to get him on espionage. They're going to get him on all these other charges that are trumped up against him. And it's also interesting, before I let you finish, Jason, that shortly before he was silenced, almost 60 days ago, Julian Assange was actually investigating and working on the UK's involvement in what has now become known as Spygate. So obviously a lot of self-interested people here who want to protect themselves. Obviously Julian Assange of WikiLeaks have hit people left and right, whether it's the military-industrial complex, Hillary Clinton, and once Hillary Clinton is your enemy, you better watch out, just to say the least.
No, you better watch out. You better watch your back. And Luke, the thing is that they actually went on the mainstream media in the United States, on CNN, Chris Cuomo, okay, the brother of the current New York governor, literally told the people that possessing the emails, the email dump, you know, those hacked emails, the ones that were never hacked. They were never hacked. They were actually leaked. But the hacked emails, it's illegal to have those. You're not allowed to read them. Let's not forget that. That's a huge lie. Let's let the media read them so they can not report on John Podesta being entertained by 3 small children in a hot tub on a farm. They don't have to report that, you know, if it's illegal to read. And I just want to say this to everybody out there. We should never fear information. And as Luke talked about these sealed indictments, how are you going to try somebody for espionage who is not an American citizen? He simply did what everybody's glorifying in a movie with Tom Hanks. See, it's okay if it's 40 or 50 years later and it's the Washington Post and we're going to make Tom Hanks look like an all-star. That type of reporting and leaking is great. He's an American hero. A foreigner does more for the United States journalistically in the past 10 years than the mainstream media, both print and television, have done in the past 50 years. Let's throw him in prison. I mean, I don't know how else to sum it up other than that. And Luke, I think we're going to be seeing more and more of these types of prosecutions with this EU law, the one that we started with Tommy Robinson. Oh, did we lose him? He just froze. I hope that Luke is able to rejoin us momentarily. But until then, we're going to get to this story, which intertwines heavily. We're gonna just hang up here and hopefully have him call us back in the middle of this. Now, people have to understand that the entire European Union is now under something called the GDPR. And essentially what this is censorship of information on the internet and the ability for you to now be prosecuted both criminally and financially for just reporting stories. And as corrupt as our media is here, and believe me, they are corrupt. They don't want to be sued. They don't want to be jailed. And now you're seeing the LA Times. You're seeing, I'm sorry. Oh, there he is right there. Let's see if we've got him.
Yeah, sorry, I lost internet connection there for just a little bit. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, you are back in the mix, and we were just discussing the latest article that intertwines with this, Luke. The fact that many U.S. media organizations are now afraid to even publish their material in any European Union countries because they can be prosecuted and they can be financially responsible. So now you're seeing things like the Los Angeles Times blocked in the EU, in the UK, Chicago Tribune blocked in the EU, in the UK, the New York Daily News, the Baltimore Sun, the Orlando Sentinel. Now, can you imagine if we got on the internet, we're at a little internet cafe, and we want to go check out the London Guardian, and it's no dice? That's essentially what's happening in Europe right now with our media. And if this continues, this censorship will not just happen in America, the EU, China. It will be a global type of censorship, Luke. That's my take.
Well, obviously, information is dangerous for big organizations and big mafias to really find out what they're doing in their workings. It's also interesting. I remember spending time with Max Kaiser in the United Kingdom, and he was telling me, like, there's a government agency in the United Kingdom that literally has transcripts of everything we say, and if we even say something facetiously or jokingly, they automatically fine us and threaten to take us off the network. So the level of just, and Max Kaiser has to censor himself, can't even be who he really is, because as soon as he is, the UK government is going to come in there and be like, oh, no, that's libelous, that's slanderous, or this is outrageous, this is not true. And if you know Max Kaiser, if you watch some of his videos, he goes offhand sometimes, and he just, lets people know in a very funny, sarcastic way what he actually thinks. So, this is definitely not good news, to say the least. We also have a super chat, Jason, that I think we should address. We got one from Fed Master, and he says, can you please cover Nicaragua and make the connection about cryptocurrencies and Maduro aligning with Nicaragua? Well, in Nicaragua, there's obviously a lot of political turmoil, a lot of political violence. I've been hearing that it's about to erupt again with more protests in Nicaragua. I was actually looking at going to that country. The dangers are very severe. I haven't done much research with the connections about cryptocurrencies and Maduro, the president of Venezuela. But I'm going to be sure to take a look at that right after this broadcast and maybe do a separate video on that later. But thank you for your super chat. Have you heard anything about Nicaragua or the cryptocurrency Maduro connection with Nicaragua, Jason?
That's something I really was not familiar with whatsoever, so it's definitely something I'll have to check out after the broadcast. Did we just lose Luke again? Man, you got to know. Oh, there he is. He's back. That Mexican internet, Luke. I don't know about it.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. I might have triggered somebody. I said it was Mexican internet,
You're going to jail, Jason. I'm going to report you.
Again, moving on now, though, to censorship, right? We now know that Facebook, our man, the Zuck, if you will, the Zuckerberg, he had to do his little prance and dance and walk in front of the EU this week, the EP, the European Parliament. And if you look at what he did, it was just, it was more of the same. Nigel Farage, the only one that asked him. But on the heels of that, now Google and Facebook are facing $8 billion worth of fines over an alleged breach of this data law. And this intertwines with not only information collection, but the type of information they're allowed to put out there, Luke. And that's why this is such a big story. The more that you go after these corporations for things like that, the less they're going to make information available to people like you and myself. He just froze again, folks. I hope that he's able to come back. There he is right there. And with that, I fear that we're just not going to get the amount of information that we need to have the proper type of discernment so we can learn the truth, Luke.
Well, the government is always looking out for their own best interest. Obviously, the privacy breaches that Facebook and Google have been committing are atrocious. Whether I believe government should stop it or fine them $8 billion, that of course is a big gray zone for a lot of people. It'll be interesting to see where this court will go, because as we know, Facebook and Google do have very powerful lobbyists, and they could definitely grease the wheels, especially in the European Union, since it's so bureaucratic, since there's so many politicians to grease the wheels of. But it'll be interesting to see if this actually does get through, because it will be a major economic hit. Obviously, I'm not a fan of Facebook, Google. Obviously, they are, giving us what is it, hundreds of pages of terms and services, and in the middle of somewhere, they pretty much own you and collect all the information about you and abuse the privileges because people use it because of their convenience. So I think a more free, open market solution with people just ignoring, not using these kind of platforms is the best way to go about it. But it's also really hard in this day and age where you need to be on Facebook if you're doing something, especially when it comes to like mass media and trying to get the word out, even though you're completely censored on that platform.
No, you're right, Luke. And talk about reaching people. Facebook is now requiring your social security number if you want to buy political ads. Now, every once in a while, we'll take an ad or boost a post to try to reach those people. And maybe this is a good move, maybe it's problematic. But when I read these sorts of things, and I don't know if you caught this story, but just the other day, Hillary Clinton said that her dream job would be heading up Facebook. That's a real thing, and a real scary thing at that. So as they have more control over the political arena, because if you look at the quote-unquote Russian ads that were taken out for, or the trolling for Donald Trump, they're almost non-existent. Okay, that's from the horse's mouth. We've shown those tweets from Facebook personnel exposing the fact that Russian meddling via Facebook is nothing but Johnny nonsense. Okay, but you get a woman like Hillary Clinton in there, baby, and I guarantee she's going to find a way to utilize Facebook in a way never seen before for her own political purposes and the agendas of her puppet masters, Luke.
Yeah, the power of Facebook can't be undermined. You have to consider, you could, and there's been many studies proving this, you could decide elections just with being able to manipulate Facebook. As we know, Mark Zuckerberg is more of a lefty. He is more of a Democrat. Obviously, he is more favorable to people like Hillary Clinton over people like Donald Trump. Obviously, now they're trying to put in more security measures, like Social Security, but already they know so much about you, and they also know about people who are not on the platform and use their spying devices and facilities and background applications that ultimately are creating a very dangerous future with such power of information being held in single hands, which obviously, power corrupts and absolutely. This will lead to abuse in the future. We got another super chat by Crazy Renee, and she's asking, Luke, will you be attending the meeting in Italy? And I think the meeting that you're talking about is the 2018 Bilderberg meeting, where 150 of some of the most influential, powerful individuals come together, along with heads of the mainstream media. And surprisingly, especially in big Western publications, there's no mention of this big secret meeting, off-the-record meeting, behind people who are from Goldman Sachs, people who are from the CIA, people who are from Google, people who are from top corporations, top banks. And of course, like every year, I've been covering Bilderberg for almost 10 years straight now. Of course, I'm going to be in Turin, Italy. I'm going to probably land there early June. The official meeting, I believe, is in June 8th to the 12th. I don't know those exact dates yet, so don't quote me on those. But of course, I will be down there reporting everything that is happening on the ground, getting in the faces of some of these participants, having a conversation with them, trying to shed light on what's really happening behind the scenes. So yeah, see you guys at Bilderberg. You guys will have definitely an awesome show. We're definitely going to be going live, which we're probably going to have to because of all the intimidation and harassment that we have to go through for just simply reporting on these events, which also had me arrested before and charged with false charges of drugs. Bilderberg security, this is a story that I think people should know about. But this was in Copenhagen a few years ago. I was with Dan Dix of Press for Truth. We saw the Bilderberg steering committee at the hotel. We walked in. This is the day before the official beginning of it, before the lockdown. We went up to him, started talking to him like, hey, just tell us what's going on here. What do you guys have planned? What do you guys, tell us about the Bilderberg meeting. Let's have an open conversation and dialogue here. Automatically getting thrown around by security guards. I was able to fake juke one out, fake 401 door, got out another door. But they got little Dan Dix and they had him by his bag. And then he was kicking around. And the security guards just manhandled him. I stayed there, filmed him, tried to tug Dan Dix away from the Bilderberg security at the hotel that they were there. Police came, they told us to stop filming. It's not illegal to stop filming in Denmark. And then they ultimately just manhandled us, threw away our video cameras, and said, yeah, you're being charged for drugs. You got drugs. Obviously, they searched us. There was no drugs. There was another hidden camera that I had that was rolling the whole time that they deleted the footage of. And we were sitting there in jail until people started calling and supporting, calling the consulate, calling the embassy, calling the government, calling the police precincts. And then luckily they kicked us out without placing any charges on us because they had nothing on us anyway. So yeah, that's what happens at Bilderberg when you are covering as a journalist. So yeah, I'm going to be there again, covering it this year in Turin. So wish me luck, and your thoughts and prayers mean a lot to me.
Well, Luke, obviously we're going to be covering that as live as we can get, and our thoughts or prayers are with you. Don't get too arrested. You know what I'm saying? If it's going to be an arrest, let's get a quick arrest in there, because you did such a good job last year. I mean, that's where we hooked up, and out of that, you know, one of the most underreported things, as Luke kind of faded out there, hopefully he'll be right back, that Luke did, which was absolutely fantastic, is he got a sit-down interview with one of the youngest, if not the youngest, Bilderberg attendee of all time, Boyan Slant, the person behind the Clean Ocean Project. And I just thought that was absolutely tremendous. Forget about the dozens of Bilderberg members that he was able to confront, okay, on their way out of the airport, which was phenomenal. Just amazing reporting. Dan Dix of Press for Truth also did an incredible job that day as well. The stuff with Larry Summers and others is some great stuff. But the fact of the matter is that, you know, Luke approached this person like a human being, boy, and he's wearing a t-shirt. He said he liked his style. He wasn't overdressed. And he reached out to Luke and actually gave him a full interview just days after the event. I believe it was in New York City, which was incredible. And it just shows you, yes, Boyan Slat, I believe I may have pronounced it wrong. And no one in the alternative media even picked up that interview. It's historic. It's the first time somebody sat down and had an open conversation about arguably the most important power player meeting of the year. Bigger than Davos, okay? Bigger than any United Nations forum, any other economic forums out there. The Bilderberg Group is the cream of the crop. Remember, they have 25 core members that show up every single year. People like Henry Kissinger are there every single year. People like David Rockefeller, I believe he went every year until the final one before his death. That's and still then Kissinger went. And obviously it was something, you know, I actually did a report for WeAreChange earlier this year called The Rockefeller Files Exposed. It showed on these little index cards that he would keep because, you know, again, his era, if you will. And remember, he was in military intelligence. A lot of people don't know that about David Rockefeller, but he was in military intelligence, and he kept these little cards. He had several on Kissinger and the Bilderberg Group, the Bohemian Grove Club. Those show up on those cards all the time. That's where they're at. Hopefully Luke's going to be able to rejoin us for this broadcast, folks. Again, it's tough. He's down in Mexico right now. So again, when he's in Italy and these things happen, hopefully we're going to be able to do reports like this one, bring you everything we can from the Bilderberg Group. And there was just such a lackluster attendance for the excuse me, Bilderberg meeting, which was held in the United States last year, which is once every, I don't know, 5-10 years. 5 years prior to that, it was in the same place in Chantilly, Virginia. And I think about 5 years prior to that, maybe 4 years prior to that as well. So Chantilly, Virginia, right outside of D.C., is a rather popular spot, I guess, in the last 10 to 15 years. But Italy, European nations, Turkey has been a location for this. And again, the mainstream media is almost completely silent about it. And the quote-unquote leading alternative media last year were shameful. They were absolutely shameful on every single front. Many of them tried to turn it into a pro-Trump rally, which was extremely upsetting to me. I mean, first of all, there weren't a lot of people out there, but you can watch a video. There's a video of about 14 or 15 people started saying that CNN is ISIS and then all these pro-Trump things. Meanwhile, Trump had 4 of his advisors inside the Bilderberg Club. We got Luke coming back. And, as I finish up on last year's Bilderberg meeting, and again, the coverage from WeAreChange was outstanding. You've got to see that Boy and Slat interview after the fact. We are hopefully rejoined by Luke. I'm not seeing any video yet. I'm hearing.
Oh, the good old Mexican internet.
Yes, we're hearing you, Luke, but there's no video. And, I was just reiterating to the audience that your coverage of Bilderberg last year was absolutely far and away the most in-depth coverage. And you got a historic interview after the fact with Boy and Slat, the youngest attendee ever of this meeting, because of the reporting you were doing there. And that was not only largely ignored by the mainstream media, but the alternative media as well. No one was talking about that sit-down you had with Boyan. Why don't you just sum up a little bit about that interview so people can go check it out? Because to me, that was a huge moment and really shows what a tremendous independent journalist you are, Mr. Rudkowski.
Well, it was just interesting because at first when I originally met him, I didn't even know who he was. And I was just like, we were at the airport, and we were like, the Bilderbergers were coming in. He was talking to some of the Bilderberg staff, and I'm like, he's very, very young. And I'm like, screw it, let's just have a conversation with him. So I started talking to him, and he started looking more scared and more kind of guilty, and he started like walking in, running down, and he did go into the official meeting. And then I found out it's, Boyle and Slot, and then I remember tweeting about the situation. He actually reached out to me through my tweets, and he said, if you want, we could have a sit down. Had a very interesting sit down. He told me some things on the record. He told me some things off the record. With helping me trying to report on this in the future, which it will. But it was fascinating to see some of his perspectives. And obviously, there's a lot of people who kind of grovel that they're being called elites, and they kind of like that kind of sinister energy and that sinister vibe. But it's fascinating to get perspective from someone that was actually there to see how the events actually proceeded and how they actually act. And obviously, there's the public people that they bring in. He was kind of their kind of PR pick for the Bilderberg meeting. And it was fascinating to hear about some of his projects as well. He's a very accomplished person. He's doing a lot of interesting things, including trying to get rid of the plastic in the oceans. And he told me, he was just like, look, calm down. I'm just trying to get funding for my project. But the whole conversation's up there. I think it's a 20-minute conversation. We pretty much got into all of it. He admitted some things. He downplayed some things. But it's a very interesting conversation with an actual Bilderberg member that actually talk to me. So I don't think he's going to be invited this year, but we'll see.
No, I don't think he is either. And he talks about Chatham House rules, kind of the over-the-table and under-the-table agreements that go on there. It's very interesting. It's fascinating stuff. It's a pioneering journalistic interview by you, Luke. So kudos to you, and I hope that we're able to do even more of that great stuff this year via the Italian conference. Now, moving on, Luke, we've got 2 stories that I think are important that kind of intertwine what we were talking about free speech. Now, again, we have to let the most abhorrent of speech be put out there. Otherwise, how are we going to have an exchange of ideas? And to me, this is essential to living in a free society. And that's why, whether I agree with this woman or not, which I do not, she posted some Holocaust denial song videos to YouTube. Well, now she's been convicted, and she's going to be doing prison time for posting naughty songs to YouTube. I think that's a huge problem. And on top of that, Luke, we now have in this country, we have a New York train rider that, he went on this racist tirade against some other passengers. And what ends up happening? Well, they're going to charge him with a hate crime. Okay, let me explain this. It's going to be a hate crime in this country. That's where we're at. And that's why there's, such a problem with this. You cannot criminalize speech. Once you start criminalizing speech and criminalizing ideas, the control gets so great you may never be able to resume an open dialogue. Okay? You look at China, for instance, and the system that they have there. And we've been covering this week after week on this broadcast and others, that they have a social media credit score. So forget about just charging people with hate crimes, which I think is a tragedy. And again, this person, let's scroll down, let's take a look at him. This guy right here, he ain't my friend. He's not somebody I like. I don't agree with him. Calling black people monkeys, it's deplorable. It's disgusting. It has no place in a civilized society or conversation. Guess what? We shouldn't be prosecuting him for it. It's just insanity. Eventually, these type of ideas lose out more and more and more, and people recognize this abhorrent behavior. And in no way should it be regulated by a government that's proven we can't trust. And we got Luke Rudkowski back. Hopefully no video yet, but I'm hoping the audio is going to pop through. That Mexican internet.
The audio will pop there. Yeah, I'm somewhere in a jungle, so apologies. I'm not in a major city. And obviously when you're in Mexican jungles, you could expect not that good of an internet connection, to say the least. So apologies again for coming back in and out. I know, Jason, you're holding it down. You're doing a good job broadcasting everything. Did you finish covering the New York train ride story?
We were just finishing that right up there, and I was just saying that, again, the speech by this guy, Luke, is abhorrent, but in no way should it be prosecuted. The idea that just putting this guy on blast and saying, look at this conversation, and letting people judge for themselves isn't enough. It is enough. I mean, look, for instance, this is a story we're not really going over, but we had that lawyer who went on that racist tirade, right? You've seen that video, have you not, in the coffee shop?
Yep.
Within a day, people had mariachi bands outside of his office playing. There is some justice in the world. Within 2 days, he was no longer able to work at his establishment because they realized, oh my God. So the court of public opinion was in on that one, and he lost. There was no reason. There was no reason to prosecute with him in a hate crime. And I think you have a similar situation with this. This didn't get quite the same media attention because he wasn't a prominent lawyer. He wasn't somebody that had a name. You know what I'm saying, Luke? And so now, hate speech Rooney, and this guy's probably going to get 3 to 5.
Yeah, this is crazy. Whenever the state gets involved, there's always issues and major implications and major problems. Obviously, we don't condone any kind of racism or hatred, because when you start, it's just the basic fact, when you start to hate something, you're giving your energy to it, and you're coming from a low vibrational spot that's not really healthy or doesn't really help anything. But I would want to know who is one of those people. With these laws, all it's going to do is push the racist people kind of underground. They're still going to be racist, but I would rather know. I would rather live in a society where I know, oh yeah, this guy's an idiot. This guy's filled with hate. This guy's filled with racism. I at least know that, and I know not to participate with them or engage with them or be connected to them. But now it's like, the state's coming after you. It absolutely makes no sense at all. It's really stupid. And this is only the beginning. Obviously, a lot of people are supporting this because obviously what he said was, pretty out there, pretty inflaming, pretty dumb. But at the same time, this is where it also begins. So this is going to be the first test trial for arresting people for their speech, and it's only going to get worse from here with governments pushing for more laws, more regulations, and it's not going to end well when we're seeing so much of just basic things being taken away from us, which sucks. And they're doing it with the support of people, and the people are cheering it on, and they mainly do that because of the mainstream media kind of propaganda that is pushing everyone to this kind of Orwellian police state, which, by the way, connects us to the next story when we're talking about the mainstream media, with Elon Musk's kind of digital war and tweet sphere that has been happening between him and members of the mainstream media. We got this next article here by USA Today that says, Musk blasts media, pitches site to rate journalists. No one believes you. And he's been on a tear on his public Twitter account, obviously citing the mainstream media's lack of integrity and their bias. And the mainstream media is striking back with more lack of integrity and absolute bias. The interactions here are pretty fascinating to see. There was one journalist, Sharon Weinberger, who tweeted, "I was once invited to visit SpaceX's facility on Kwajalein. Following interviews, I was told Elon Musk had to review all articles prior to publication. I explained journalism doesn't work that way. His current tweet comes as no surprise." And of course, Elon Musk answered back, "Yes, because Tesla has the most advanced battery manufacturing technology in the world and products that haven't been unveiled yet. You don't have a right to show that to our competitors or spoil future product launches." He also went on a tirade and went and said, "Who do you think, quote, owns the press? Question mark, hello." So he's definitely not holding anything back. And it's very interesting to see him now talk about building an organization that's going to be calling out fake news, which he has been dealing with a lot.
Absolutely. And, the thing about this is he did interact with so many people. So immediately the mainstream media jumped on him and basically compared him to Donald Trump, and he put them in their place. He's like, no. This isn't a comparison to Donald Trump. This is showing you why Trump got elected, because he started talking about the fake news media, and the people don't believe you anymore. He put it that bluntly, and he's right. Now, I thought it was a little odd that he decided that he wanted to call his organization Pravda, Luke. I don't know how you feel about that, but those that don't know what Pravda is, Pravda was a well-known propaganda mouthpiece for the Soviet Union and Russia. Now, later in this tweet storm, my friend, he actually goes in and tries to buy Pravda.com. Russia says it's not for sale. He eventually says he gets it. Now, in between that, he says he owns YourRight.com, and maybe he'll use that. I think that that's actually probably the better way to go, although the irony of Pravda may work. Here's my problem. He's quick to point out that Tesla doesn't take out advertising, and this puts a conundrum into journalists because, they are looking for those clicks. They are looking for those advertising dollars. He's quick to point out that the oil companies and other energy companies out there are huge supporters financially of the media. The thing is Musk going to be able to be honest when we reported last week, Luke, that he's now $35 million balls deep into some Soros money via bond with his Tesla Motors company? And we know that George Soros owns Media Matters, is heavily involved in media already. So I'm taking it with a grain of salt. Love what he's saying.
Yeah.
Love the idea.
Yeah.
But we can't just believe, the musky nuts over there. We've gotta hold his feet to the fire just like anybody else.
Of course, and it's not just Soros that you have to worry about with Soros's money going into his projects. It's also the U.S. government money, since he gets a lot of grants from the U.S. government, specifically to launch a lot of his products. Obviously, you can't always bite the hand that feeds you, and the mainstream media, they always do the bidding of the government. So obviously, a great connection there with the Soros thing. Can't fully support it all out. It's good to see the banter. It's good to see the conversation started that Elon Musk did, talking about how journalism is not journalism now, and it absolutely sucks. And already there's other organizations that I met and I talked to. One of them is The Knife Media. They're on Twitter, at The Knife Media. I'm going to actually link this video. I did an interview with them, and I had a trolling title quote saying, "You won't believe what President Trump just ate for breakfast," kind of sensationalizing and making fun of the sensationalism that mainstream media puts on everyone else, talking about actual stories that talk about nonsense, spew fake news. And there's actually organizations out there that could actually rank them, that actually debug all the propaganda and emotional trigger points that they use in order to push a greater agenda. Obviously, with Elon Musk, I don't see him as being totally partial, especially with all the money coming in from the sources that you mentioned, Jason.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we need to keep an eye on this. But as we talk about Musk creating his own website to rank the truthiness, I guess, of news. Remember that term, the truthiness? Because me and you, we've been talking about fake news for well over a decade. It hasn't just been a buzzword the last 2 or 3 years for us. There's plenty of media manipulation and fake news out there. And now you have the Associated Press, one of the purveyors of, I would call it, raw sources of news. One of these organizations like Reuters actually has a not real news section where once a week they're going through not real news, a look at what did not happen this week. So I think that's really interesting in an era of, the Obamas getting Netflix deals and being able to, push their own media ideology on people. I mean, Netflix is huge. Well, now you have raw media organizations now saying, we'll tell you what the truth is, but weren't they supposed to be doing that anyway, Luke?
Yeah, I mean, some of the articles that they're picking out obviously are very softball articles. The first one that we're seeing up here is American restaurant granted permission to sell dog meat. That's really the problem. That's really the fake news that we're dealing with. Fake news has been able to create wars. They have caused tragic events for unknown numbers of people. When you're talking about fake news, the story that always comes up to me is the fact that the mainstream media reported that the air was safe to breathe after 9/11 in New York City. Obviously, a lot of people knew that story was bullcrap. Obviously, the mainstream media that was reporting it was safe just a few months before that, and even years before that, was reporting how the Twin Towers that collapsed on 9/11 were filled with asbestos. Obviously, when asbestos white elephant towers come down, obviously the air is not going to be safe to breathe. But the mainstream media told everyone the air was safe to breathe, and now over 50,000, some people even estimate hundreds of thousands of people will be adversely affected. I live down in New York City. The whole dust cloud came through my neighborhood. You could write your name in dust. And I just, have to continually get checked out. And it's scary to know what's going to happen with so many people just being outright lied to by the mainstream media, puppeteering what the government said without any investigation, without any thought, ultimately killing a lot of them. But no, American restaurant granted permission to sell dog meat. That's what the AP is going after.
Well, Luke, I'm glad you just mentioned those deaths, right? Because just this week, brother, we've had 2 separate deaths related to the 9/11 dust. And you know who they are? They're members of the FBI. In fact, just yesterday, the head of the FBI in Atlanta, and I'm bringing these stories up, dies of cancer linked to working on the toxic World Trade Center in the aftermath of 9/11. If that were the only story, I think that would be enough to prove your point, Luke. The day before, another FBI agent dies from brain cancer linked to 9/11 attack on the Pentagon. And this is something that is a blip in the news that nobody wants to discuss. The Zadroga Act quietly passed, but like you just said, man, they're dropping daily. And I know you were close to the World Trade Center. You were down there daily, and I pray to God that you're never going to have to feel those physical repercussions, but I understand your concerns when we have to report stories like this one, because you're not going to see this on CNN. You're not going to see this prominently on Fox News or MSNBC, Luke.
Yeah, and it's worrying. It's hard seeing the articles, and they pop up almost once a week. 9/11 first responder died because of his work at Ground Zero. I'm dealing with a lot of adverse health effects. That's why I'm in Mexico right now at a medical clinic trying to get checked out, trying to do some alternative healings. It scares the crap out of me. And sadly, these mainstream media people, they're pompous, they're elitist, they're usually limousine liberals who think that they could just get away and do what they want. They're so arrogant. They even openly brag about how they just use propaganda to manipulate people, like the next story that we have up from a Council on Foreign Relations forum that was specifically about fake news, where we have the former editor at Time magazine, Richard Stengel, saying that he supports the use of propaganda on American citizens, and then he shuts down the session when someone challenged him about how propaganda is being used against the third world. We have a little clip from that, right, Jason? Can we play a bit of that?
Yeah, we do, and it's pretty incredible, because this is a guy that worked for the Department of Defense, I believe, and was the editor of Time Magazine, and he loves the propaganda, Luke, but let his words speak for himself.
The last question, but I just want to weigh in on that for 1 second. So there's another word for master narratives. It's called history. Basically, every country creates their own narrative story. And you know, my old job at the State Department was what people used to joke as the chief propagandist job. We haven't talked about propaganda. Propaganda, I'm not against propaganda. Every country does it, and they have to do it to their own population. And I don't necessarily think it's that awful. And this idea of a news cartel, I mean, I was editor of Time in 2012 during that election, and I remember, you know, you're competing against cartels and everybody. I remember being on a panel with the then editor of the New York Times, who said, it's really hard to break through these days.
Well, let's just pause it right there and go, because he just said a lot, right, Luke? He said, my job at the State Department was often referred to as the chief propagandist, and he's prideful of that, baby. He can't get enough of that. That's his gravy train with biscuit wheels job. He openly admits that he's for propaganda, especially against a nation's own people, and then falsely states that it's really tough for things like the New York Times to break through. I mean, that's a whole lot to handle. Rudkowski, what's your take on this Council on Foreign Relations madman?
Well, I'm not surprised at all, and at least we're getting some kind of witness to their actual thought process, which is, I would say, a little demented. Definitely not a friend of the Council on Foreign Relations. They're kind of another underlying quasi-secret society. Some of their meetings are private, some of their meetings are public. But when you look at a lot of the intersexuality with mainstream media, the CFR is all up in there. The mainstream media and CFR hand in hand. A lot of their members are, CFR members. I personally, interesting story, if you guys want to know, I was personally banned from entering the Council on Foreign Relations after numerous confrontations, numerous interviews with a lot of these globalists. First, they banned my name. I used the second name. Then I used the third name. Then I walked in as an assistant to somebody, to the point where Eric Schmidt's girlfriend, who was running press relations for the Council on Foreign Relations, personally called me on my phone number and ultimately said, Rudkowski, no. I sent out another email at that time saying, hey, I'm going to be attending your event here. I forgot who was speaking, but some globalists were speaking. And then she decided to personally call me back and said, if you step on the property, we will automatically arrest you. Do not show up. And I had a little banter. I recorded it. Not releasing it, but I forgot what I said. I said something really facetious and really I'm playing along with it. But yeah, I am officially banned from the Council on Foreign Relations from even entering that building and the public discussions that they have. And this is what they say in public. Imagine what they say in private.
Absolutely. And for those that don't know what the Council on Foreign Relations is, other than being a think tank, it was really the precursor to the League of Nations and then the United Nations. You can find out a whole bunch about that in my film, Invisible Empire, A New World Order Defined, free online. We have a large section. So if you want to see members of the Council on Foreign Relations that also intersect into some of these organizations like the Bilderberg Group that Luke just talked about, please go check out that film because it really lays it down. Luke, I think we should move on. If people want to check out that full video, we're actually going to be posting that at the Facebook page, probably in Veeam format, later this evening. I wanted to get into some domestic news. There's a slew of articles here, and they all relate with one another. Why your health insurer doesn't care about your big bills? Well, that was the scam of Obamacare, of forcing us into insurance. Let's hike the price up. You know, this is a story about a guy that goes in, he ends up getting a $70,000 surgery that costs, you know, the person on Medicare less than a third of that. And then he's on the hook for over $7,000 of it. This is a guy that pays his premiums, Luke, that bought into the system. And if he had just been a poor person, he would have been paying a lot less. And that's a huge issue because there's no care for poor people. If you look at this article, it's worse than murder. And this isn't even in our country. This is out of The Guardian, by the way. We can't report on this in our country. How rural America became a hospital desert. Over 40 plus hospitals in U.S. rural areas. Guess what, Luke? They're gone. They're Johnny Gone sense. And if you look at this article, that even intertwines with that, the trouble with charitable billionaires. This handily points out the Rockefeller Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Zucker flux of the world that are getting all this corporate welfare. Well, if they gave some of that money to you and me, Luke, we wouldn't have to pay for insurance at all. We could be medically taken care of time and time and time and time again. There would be no poverty lines associated with medical care in this country if these billionaires were actually donating to the people. But instead, most of us can't afford the overarching costs of medical care because they're so over the top. And these people are really investing in themselves and their own businesses. And guess what? It makes me want to vomit, my man.
Yeah, and I'm dealing with it face on, especially in New York City. There was a hospital closed recently in my area as well. It was just with doctors all this week and last week, and the whole system is just screwed. Medical insurance cut me off. They approved some work to be done on me, but then they cut me off, and now I'm supposed to owe a couple $1,000s to this doctor's office, and I'm like, wait, hell no! You never told me I'm going to be paying for this. So now I'm in the stage where I have to now fight this whole thing because insurance didn't notify them that they approved work, and now they're cutting me off at the same time. So it is an absolute nightmare to deal with the medical industry in the United States, and a lot of times they're not helpful at all. All they do is throw antibiotics at you. Throughout my life, I've been on so many different antibiotics, and things just ruins your gut flora, ruins your health, and it only makes it worse. They give you so many gosh darn side effects, and they screw you over. They make you fear, they make you panic, which only creates more stress. And if you look at a lot of the major diseases, they are amplified or created directly from stress. So it's a whole entire industry that is ultimately so corrupt. There's so many backward deals. There's so much money in this industry. And if you look at mainstream media, a lot of the mainstream media companies, they're sponsored by Pfizer. They're sponsored by a lot of these big medical companies, and that's why we're seeing so little reporting on just how absolutely broken the medical system is in the United States.
Yeah, man, and it is criminal, my friend. And
Can you still hear me?
Yeah, you just broke up for a second, but you're back in. It's absolutely crazy that someone like yourself, again, you paid into the system. You did what was asked of you. And what happened? They came up right behind you. They said, don't worry, we're here to help. We're here to help. Then they slowly bent you over and got you from behind. And like you said, you didn't know you were going to be on the hook thousands of dollars for a doctor's visit. Folks, not a surgery, not an MRI, to talk to another human being. And unfortunately, we live in a state where medical care is just over the top. I mean, if I want to go to Albany Med for something, that's crazy. I can't imagine what it costs you to go to a Mount Sinai in New York City because, again, they're not out to help us. It's a command and control system. And to us, Luke, we're just chattel that pay the bills, my man. And it looks like we just broke up with Rudkowski again. He's on that Mexican internet, folks. I think I hear him, but he's frozen. There he is. He's back.
There we go.
But I think that we should move on to a couple of the international stories that we need to cover, Luke. And one of them is really, really bizarre. And it involves a Saudi Arabian prince that has been behind all sorts of conundrums and really reestablishing who the Saudi Arabian elites are. He went in and arrested all of these other royals on quote-unquote corruption charges. And he seemed to be a big pal to Donald Trump. We do this arms deal with him. We know that a lot of these people have bought in their way out or been in prison. Some of them been tortured. Well, what's not being reported on in the mainstream media in this country is the fact that there was a gun battle outside of his hotel. Let's see if we can get some of the audio in here. And so the hotel where everybody is being held here. Let's go back right there. Go back to it. This is the firefight, and it's clear that this is a heavy gunfire fight. We hear it for about a minute, okay? And from that time on, folks, we had not seen this Saudi Arabian prince. Now, they tweeted out a photograph of him with some other dignitaries at one point, and just this week, they put this photograph out here, where apparently he is in a meeting with other Saudi dignitaries of the royal family. Now, if you didn't notice, he's all the way in the back. It's not a very high resolution photograph, and it could easily be faked. I'm a Photoshop guy myself. I'm not saying it is being faked, but the idea that this guy hasn't been on video, that he hasn't come out and denied that something has happened to him, there is the possibility that he is alive, but perhaps he got severely injured in this gun battle. There's the possibility that he's dead, and U.S. intelligence agencies are now trying to figure out who they're going to be able to work with, and the Saudi Arabians are figuring out who they're going to put in a position of public power and how they're going to explain away this prince and a possible coup d'etat that has occurred. And this is just one of those stories that has been so underreported in the mainstream media and not looked at all. So we have to cover it here. It reminds me a lot of the story that we saw just around Christmas time of last year. It's already 6 months old, that we've never got any clarification on. And that story is the former Iranian president, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, being arrested by the current Prime Minister of Iran. And those were just reports. They fell by the wayside, and nobody did follow-ups. And we really don't know whether he's been arrested or not, but he certainly hasn't been in any public forums, which is also extremely odd. And then in other Middle Eastern news, we have the Islamic State killing 4 Russian soldiers in Syria. And this is just today, folks. Now, why is this important? Well, first of all, we know that ISIS is almost completely defeated in Syria. The Syrian army has declared victory. Putin has declared victory, okay? But it shows that in some respects, the Islamic State isn't going to go anywhere. Even if they have 50 radicals that can be put on a government payroll and cause some disruption in order for the United States, France, and other European allies to remain there under the guise of fighting terror, that's what they want. They have no intentions of leaving. And, again, we were some of the first people to report Trump saying it's time to get out of Syria, and then starting to take those actions and repeating that it was time to get out of Syria, and then all of a sudden we had this chemical attack that proved to be no attack whatsoever. We had, threats of World War III. We had bombing on what appeared to be predetermined sites, and so much more. And now, with these reports, man, every time I go back live, it messes up that thing. We have these reports that 4 Russian soldiers have been killed by the Islamic State in Syria, which shows an Islamic State presence. And Luke, that means that the United States and its European allies will get to have their troops in Syria that much longer, because those demons in ISIS, they're at it again, Luke.
Well, just recently, the United States announced that they're going to be building more bases and sending more U.S. troops to Syria, as well as French troops that are accompanying them, who are mainly alongside the Kurds, but also some other Sunni rebels that are not ISIS. What's really interesting here with that Saudi Arabian story that you just covered before this, we know, it's pretty clear. ISIS, when they're fighting, their funding came directly from Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the United States. Their weapons that they're using are coming directly from those countries. So seeing, 4 Russian soldiers die, it is not a surprise. Obviously, it's been just a horrible, bloody conflict in Syria, with the United States fortifying its positions there, especially in the northeast region of Syria. This is not going to go away anytime soon. And it's a very dangerous predicament that's going to lead into the next story because, again, accidents happen all the time. We already have Russian forces, American forces fighting on the ground. American forces have already killed Russian mercenaries in that country. And all it takes is pretty much a mistake for direct conflicts to happen between these world powers. And with them being on the ground at the same time on opposing sides, this could lead to very grave repercussions. And it leads us to the next story with the accidents that we were talking about, where we're seeing from the AP that security troops on a U.S. nuclear missile base were caught taking acid and LSD, which it's not a good combination.
Not just taking it, but dealing it. It was actually a drug ring. And yes, we're talking captains, colonels, pretty much top military brass inside a U.S. nuclear facility, not only taking hallucinogenics, Luke, which, again, it's just like any other tool out there. It's like a hammer. You can build a house with it or you bash someone's head in it. There are definitely some positives, in my opinion. We had this conversation a little bit last week about psychedelic drugs, the acids of the world, the mushrooms of the world, the DMTs of the world. But I'm not so sure I want my military personnel with the ability to maybe, launch some nuclear warheads to be involved in psychedelic drugs. I don't know.
Well, as we know, acid and LSD pretty much came from the U.S. government. I'm watching a great documentary called Wormwood on Netflix, which goes into the history of the early LSD studies where knowingly government agents were just drugging people all over the place, which led to some suicides, which led to people killing themselves, which people believe was actually done by the CIA to cover up all their crazy experiments and programs that they started doing with LSD and acid. So this is not a surprising story, especially if you look at the history of where acid came from, how it was used, how it was tested, and just some of the nefarious things that the government did with it beforehand. But in kind of similar psychedelic news, we're also hearing that Denver and Oregon may want to even legalize psychedelic mushrooms. Obviously, we got into the topic of psychedelic mushrooms last week. There's a very interesting discussion, a lot of interesting medical studies showing effectiveness of mushrooms when it comes to people dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. So that is some optimistic news in the field of alternative medicine that sadly is being squashed and destroyed by big pharma that just keeps throwing medicine at you and screwing up your health and indebting you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, but you know what, Luke? This is a promising story, and of course, you're in Mexico now, but in New York City just this week, de Blasio has basically decriminalized marijuana. He has ordered police to stop arresting people to smoke in public. The first shop selling marijuana in New York City has now been opened, and we've covered it on this show. Cuomo, a couple months ago, said he is fast-tracking legislation to legalize marijuana now that both New Jersey and Massachusetts have done so, because there's really no keeping it out. These are positive changes, in my opinion, in the ether, in the zeitgeist, in our culture, Luke. And like you said, there are a lot of great studies out there that show that psychedelics, especially psilocybin mushrooms, can restructure the way the brain works in a positive manner. And to those that have been in some deep shiznizzle, you know what I'm saying? I can't imagine what some of these people that have had to fire on other human beings have been through, have seen that their best friend blown up next to them. I hope that I never have to take some kind of a medication or go to some kind of therapy to deal with a situation like that. But like we've discussed, there seems to be a lot of positivity with studies surrounding mushrooms. So this is, I always like kind of heading towards the end of the program with a positive story. This is that positive story, Luke.
Well, it's not a synthetic compound created by the government for mind control experiments, which is a plus. And a lot of people are seeing the effectiveness of mushrooms. A lot of other countries are doing even bigger studies and bigger case studies with them, which is really interesting to see. And I kind of just wanted to leave it on a positive note, including this last article that I have for you guys, which is an article that it says how to train your brain to go positive instead of negative. I'm actually going to send this story into the chat room on our YouTube channel so people could see it for themselves at the end of our broadcast. Definitely recommend to read it. I read it, I liked it, and a lot of things, whether it's placebo, whether it's just changing your mindset, have to deal with just your thoughts. There's always this hippie term that I got reminded of today because of the people that I'm hanging out here in Mexico. And even the Mexican doctor that I sat down and talked to today, he was like, dude, you're creating all these problems with all this stress that's being created by the medical industry that's trying to freak you out and trying to make you broke. You got to relax, de-stress. And obviously also being a journalist, it is true that we are overworked. We bust our butts all the time. We have deadlines. We have a lot of pressure on us to do a video almost every single day. Being on the road, risking my safety, it's not the best environment to put my body in, but one of the things that has allowed me to keep going is having a positive mind frame, because obviously your thoughts become your words become your actions become your habits become your values, and your values become your destiny. It all begins on a very micro level, and I lost track of that. I totally forgot about that. It used to be a big essential part of my life, and now I'm caught up running around from one doctor's office to another doctor's office, not sleeping, being all stressed out that something's wrong with me, and I'm like, wait, I'm creating my own personal hell. So this is just a friendly reminder. Stop creating your own personal hell. Be careful of your thoughts and be just as considerate with what you put into your stomach, the same way with the things that you put into your mind. It's important to cover all the things that are happening, to know what's happening in this world, to get it from an unbiased perspective, to get it from a real perspective. But at the same time, you can't just always dwell on negativity and hatred and anger. You have to keep a positive frame of mind, especially in this business, especially talking and reporting on the stuff that we do talk about and the serious topics that we get into that do need to get fixed. And the only way to really fix it is to address it and to first actually know about it, which is the purpose of our news organization. That's my hippy-dippy rant from a bohemian hippie jungle town here next to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. Jason?
Yeah, I just want to note something here. Look on the bottom of the article, and it literally reads, we've updated our privacy statement to support new EU data protection law. So even when we're trying to end on the positive note, Luke, my friend, this story that we really started with, that we began with, the censorship of the internet, the criminalization of speech, the criminalization of reporting the news, has its tentacles everywhere, even on the positive article on how to train your brain to live a better lifestyle. And that should really warn people where our society globally is heading. It is really heading into this Orwellian society where it is decided for us what we are allowed to hear, see, and understand. And that's extremely dangerous. And unless we break those chains, I don't think that we're going to be able to maintain a positive mindset. I don't think that information in itself, Luke, is bad and stressful. It's how we deal with that information. So, the truth should never be shied away from. I've never been a believer in the ignorance is bliss theory, Mr. Rudkowski.
Yeah, there's nothing more annoying than a sheep hippie. Have you ever interacted with some of those people who are just totally blind and not caring about their surroundings or what's going around them, but they're still hippie? They're so annoying. It's good to stay informed also for your safety and security, and for you to move in this life in the positive pathway. that has good effects, and the only way to really do that is to actually know what's happening in this entire world. So it's basically that simple. And it's also that complicated because, again, you lose track of these things. You lose track of hearing about bad stuff and just getting engulfed in it and wrapped in it and being in this negative thing, and then you start acting like the very people that you're against, and you never want to put yourself in that situation because that's how they are able to control you, and it's basically fear. Fear, again, is just another form of slavery. It's another form of control. It's another form of censorship. It's another form of restricting everything. If you want to go to the opposite way of that, you go towards love. And love is all about freedom. It's all about accepting. It's all about living your life in a productive, cohesive way that benefits you and everyone else around you. It doesn't hurt them. And in this day and age, with so much disinformation, with so much propaganda, you have to be aware. You have to tune yourself into the realities of this world to make sure you're not having a negative effect on it. There's so many people I met even recently who were working for all these big companies. And not only they were telling me about how empty their life was, but some of the things that they were working on, they have huge regrets on, especially a lot of engineers and a lot of tech people that I know who are like, I was just working on really evil, sinister things, and I just had to quit. And people quit, and they just go off into the world and do other things. But they have to become aware of the bigger cycle and the bigger things that they're a part of. And it all begins with educating yourself, informing yourself, being knowledgeable of everything that's happening. That's why I enjoy this job so much. That's why you guys give me this opportunity with your donations, with your super chats, to be able to research things and study them. And it is difficult to keep that positive mind frame. It's something I struggle with. It's something that I forgot recently. But now, slowly being reminded of that. I'm slowly probably going to go meditate and calm myself down and relax after this somewhere on the beach just a few blocks away from here. Eat some good food that doesn't involve crazy amounts of hormones and sugars and all this other bull crap that they put in our food. You go to the supermarket nowadays, or even go to a convenience store or a bodega, you look around and it's like, man, all this stuff is poison. And at the same, with you having all this poison around you, it's very hard to find that good snack for you. It's very hard to find something that's actually good for your body and system. It's the same thing in the media landscape. It's like being in a convenience store surrounded by Coca-Cola and Snickers and all this other high fructose corn syrup and fake cancer-inducing chemicals bullcrap. It's the same in the media sphere when you go online with all the click tits and all the fake news and all the hooey and malarkey and sensationalism and just crap that people put in your mind because it's a weapon. So be very careful with the food you take, but also the thoughts and ideas you put into your mind. This is my personal frame. This is where I'm coming from. This is how I'm basing how I run WeAreChange as a news organization. I'm just giving you a little behind the scenes. What do you think about that? Do you disagree or agree with me, Jason?
No, I definitely think that your mental stability and the way that you treat your mind is just as important as your physical stability.
Because if you're a butthole and you're in this industry, you're spreading the butthole essence everywhere. If you're not a good person, and a lot of people in media think they're a good person, but they're not. There's a lot of ego, there's a lot of pride, there's a lot of glutinous, screwed up behavior. You're only through your work pushing your own crap that you're dealing with and don't have an opportunity to face and reflect on and become a better person because of. There's so much childhood trauma with almost everyone. It is just utterly insane. Sorry for cutting you off, Jason.
No, I think you're absolutely right, Luke. And the bottom line is that there are things to stress out over, okay? But you shouldn't be stressing out. If there's a problem, you got to work towards solving it, right? So you got to take a deep breath, and obviously you're doing that with your medical situation right now. You're talking to other people, you're trying to decompress. So what you're doing is you're trying not to stress out about it, and you're making a plan. You're being positive, and you're trying to get that situation taken care of so it can no longer stress you out. And I think that so many people out there play the victim in almost every single adverse situation that they come across, that's kind of become the societal norm. You know, I don't want to talk about the failure to launch Millennial too much, but I think that's pretty indicative on how people think these days in many cases. Like, this is a 30-year-old man that lives with his folks that can't find a way out. It's like, bro, you live outside of Syracuse. You can get a job.
But hey, now he's getting $3,000 for getting interviewed.
I know. Well, that shows you how the media works. Okay, not just that organization paying for an interview. They did that because that's a media norm. Now, obviously, this has received more attention because the persona that did this is often attacked by the mainstream media. But, dude, can you imagine how much Stormy Daniels has raked in from her media? Her CNN interviews, her ABC interviews, her NBC interviews, her spot on Saturday Night Live, all because she banged a dude for money, took his money, then took more money to shut the F up about it, then said, I want more money, I'm a-talking. Okay?
Yep.
So it just shows you how messed up the media is and the mindset of people everywhere. It's about making that dollar and being lazy and playing the victim, Luke, and that's not what WeAreChange is about.
Well, they're programming people, whether knowingly or unknowingly. Personally, I believe they know what they're doing, but that's just my own personal theory and belief out there, to be these victims, to be these people like, help me, and doing stupid things just for attention. And it's working because sadly people are drawn to the odd things, the stupid things, and they're making it seem like it's popular to be like a Kim Kardashian type, or to be Stormy Daniels. But in reality, if you look at the creation of these archetypes of these creatures, there's nothing but sinister big money behind them, creating the dumbassification of our society, and also creating us in a negative thought loop of how they act as an example to others. When you give us a key to Stormy Daniels, it's like, what example are you setting to the youth of the world when you're doing this? So again, it's all the butthole essence that I'm talking about that is being spread, and there are probably individuals in media who are spreading their of neediness, of lack, and of pain and suffering that they can't process unknowingly. But there's also people who the system operates and know to push it. We got another comment here by SJK Builds, and he's saying spreading butthole essence, that's called a fart. And I think you're right there, pretty much. So it's just an analogy that I was using to people's thoughts, feelings, and emotions that they really don't have under control. Sometimes I lose control of them too, and we can only strive to be better by admitting our faults. And I think this is, one way for me to express that, to have this conversation with you guys. I think, I'm going to also change maybe the direction that we're going in, talk about, and I think I'm going to start getting back to doing more interviews with fascinating people that I meet. I meet so many fascinating people, and just sharing their stories, and sharing some of the kind of deeper perspectives and solution-oriented things out there, which are not going to be great for titles, which are not going to be great for clicks. But if you guys like it and support it and donate, I'll definitely make sure I'll do this. It's a risky gamble because we could totally lose everything. But I fully believe in everything that I'm doing. I fully believe in myself. I fully believe I'm going to get better. I'm going to be healthier. Nothing's going to stop me. They could throw me in jail. They can intimidate me. It doesn't matter. I am not going away anytime soon. They could censor me totally online, and I'll be selling bootleg DVDs of my videos on the corner for $5 a pop. It doesn't matter. It will still happen the way it needs to happen. So that's my rant. No brain farts on that one.
Well, I just want to thank everybody for joining us this evening, getting around the celebritard culture that is definitely a symptom of the disease that is the media out there, Luke. And that's why this independent media organization is so important. And I want to remind people it's only through your donations, your support, that this is even possible. And guys, you've got to go to youtube.com/WeAreChange every single day now to check and see if we have a video, because guess what? they just killed the subscription feed as well. Forget about notifications for live events. Forget about recommended videos. Forget about trending. They have literally now censored your subscription feed, so you will not know when Luke or I drop a video. It's pretty insane, folks, so we need your support more than ever. Luke, do you want to wrap it up and speak to that? Because, again, the subscription feed is dead.
Well, to a lot of people, it is. YouTube's experimenting with it, depending if you're lucky or not. Sometimes you may get a notification, sometimes you may not. Did my computer just die?
Just your video.
Okay, well, stay away from the fart essence.
Well, guys, he did just die right there. So for Luke Rudkowski, and of course, I am Jason Bermas. This is WeAreChange.org. He loves you. I love you. Guys, we will be back next week. I promise you, a Sunday sometime between, 6 and 8 Eastern to bring you all the news that you didn't hear in the mainstream media this week. Guys, thank you so much for joining us.